Hi everyone, it's me again, and I can't remember the last time I recorded two episodes back to back, and it's so odd of all the times I've gone through in this year 2019. I don't know what it's been like for you guys, but it's been pretty tough, pretty interesting, to say the least. So yeah, this second episode in one day is related to a poem. So I'll read you an extract of the poem. It's from Rainer Maria Rilke's book called Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. And the book is divided into three parts. The book from the book of A Monastic Life, the book of Pilgrimage, and the book of Poverty and Death. The extract I'm going to read to you and discuss a few points that really stood out for me, and I'd like to share some thoughts about those things. Comes from the book of Poverty and Death. So I'm not going to jump in from the beginning of the poem. This is somewhere close to the beginning. And interestingly enough, obviously Rilke is a German, a very famous German poet, and I always find it fascinating when I read poets from around the world, different nationalities and cultures, and I always find it intriguing when they mention anything related to my part of the world, the Arab world. So when I read this extract and it immediately spoke about my part of the world, it stood out in a very positive way. So without further ado, I'm going to read you the part of the poem I'd like to share with you. Many are the rich who display themselves. The palaces preen like gorgeous birds, whose cry is a raucous screech, but they are not truly rich. Not rich like the nomad chieftains, whose multiples of sheep, whose swept cross green plains like a morning tide, or those whose camels moved against the sky in majestic silhouettes. The smell of their cattle herds lingered warm and heavy 10 days after they passed, and as at a fine wedding the good wine flows the whole night through, so ran the milk from their she-asses. And not like the desert sheikhs, who slept at night on faded carpets, but had rubies set in silver combs to groom their favorite mares. And not like those princes who found no allurement in gold, no fragrance there, but anointed their proud lives with almond oil, amber, and sandalwood. Those were riches that made life vast and voluptuous. Now the days of riches are gone, and no one can bring them back for us, but we can let ourselves be poor again. We are not poor, we are just without riches. We who have no will, no world, marked with the marks of the latest anxiety, disfigured, stripped of leaves. Around us swirls the dust of cities, the garbage clings to us. We are shunned as if contaminated, thrown away like broken pots, like bones, like last year's calendar. So I'm going to stop there and just highlight some of the parts that really stuck out for me. When we talk about people being rich, and we live in a world where I think everybody is obsessed, absolutely, in a scary way, really obsessed with being rich. The appearance of rich, everything associated with cars, all very, very materialistic. It's palaces, supercars, cash, bling, and anything that shines and glitters, and brands, and obviously the list goes on and on and on. And I've always found the concept of people's obsession with being rich quite interesting, because I had the privilege of going to school with some very, very wealthy people. I mean, these are people that literally lived in palaces. Palaces so large that they would need a car. They would literally need to get into a car to get from one section of their house to the other. And what I found, what I saw very, very clearly was that you can have all of that. You can have all of that and not be happy at all. Now that's not saying you shouldn't be rich. It's just that how we define rich here is the ultimate point, where the poet here mentions that the people are not rich like the nomad chieftains. And then he goes on, not like the desert sheikhs. And I love the part here where he says, not like the desert sheikhs who slept at night on faded carpets, but had rubies in silver combs to groom their favorite mares. Man, oh man, do I love that. I love it because it's so real, and I've seen people blessed with that, where they live humble. I mean, when he says they sleep on faded carpets, and they groom their favorite mares with combs of silver, when you meet somebody like that, who's very content with living a minimalistic life, but is rich beyond imagination, in the sense that they may own things that are ridiculous value, absolutely ridiculous value, and they use that to enrich their already rich life. This desert sheikh here obviously loves horses, and no amount of money, no amount of palace, no amount of materialistic goal is going to take that. All he did with these riches is just enrich his already rich life. And that can be such a simple life, where you live in what other people today would call poor conditions. But if your soul is very rich, and you love what you do, and you have a connection to, in this case, horses or the earth, and you do have wealth, and you use that wealth authentically, then that is a truly rich life. That's what the poet says. Those were riches that made life vast and voluptuous. And the other part of the poem where he says, and not like those princes who found no allurement in gold, no fragrance there. I mean, how true is that? You can have the whole obsession with money, money, money. I need lots and lots of money. Well, not to get too philosophical on it, of course money is important. Of course gold's important, especially now with what the world's going through. But what are we ultimately going to use that gold and that money for? If it's not to genuinely enrich our lives in a meaningful purpose, then you're actually very poor. You're poor of content, you're poor of soul, and no amount of money, no amount of palace or car is going to fill that void. And it's very clear for everybody to see. You might be walking about with Rolex watches that are in excess of, I don't know, 100,000 US dollars, but you're the poorest person I've ever seen. And that's fine, I guess, if that's what you want to do. But for me, the inheritance that we all have goes way beyond any materialistic value. And to live a life where you annote your own proud lives, as Relk says here, with almond oil, amber, and sandalwood. So you walk into, just to give you an example, you walk into the desert and you see a tent, and a very kind and hospitable Arab comes out. I'm using the word Arab, you can substitute that for any native individual, although I really don't like the word native, but I think you know what I mean. A person of the land, a person that was there way before all the modern skyscrapers came. And this is a person that still lives pretty much like he was before. Not ill-educated, he or she knows what's going on, but they prefer to stay close to the earth. They prefer to live a life where they're connected to their ancestors, and they're rooted. They don't need to be living in a tent, but they choose to. They may have palaces, but they choose to live in a tent for a period of time to reconnect, so to speak. And when you see somebody who living in such humble surroundings, and you come in and they invite you, and they serve you coffee in really expensive coffee pots, and a part of you is thinking, well, if you can afford this coffee pot, why don't you get out of this disgusting way of living? Go live in a palace. Why have that ability and not change? And it really intrigues me, because when you do meet people like that who live humble, they're rich, and they give and give and give, and they're giving maybe something simple like a date, but I'm guaranteeing you they're richer than most of us that may have a lot of money in our bank account. I do not have a lot of money in my bank account, but I have enough to appreciate what I have, and I have enough to allow me to really admire a rich person in the true sense of the word, like the poet mentioned.